Mark, why don't you begin by telling us a little bit about LSC? And in some ways, you're a typical manufacturer, in other ways, you're atypical, as well as your role within the company.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, James. I'm really the technology leader here within a business segment as part of an organization called LSC Communications. We are focused and run and maintain the print and logistics capabilities, supporting about 20 locations across the United States. Recently went through a lot of different transformation efforts around our infrastructure, collaboration, data and analytics platforms, edge improvements within the facilities themselves. So there's a lot of activity going on right now. It's been several years in the making to build and improve this foundation within our locations and improve our operational capabilities within the sites, as well as our IT operations, improve frontline worker experience, and as well as a lot around our core application base that we have supporting today.
If you would take us back to when you were first considering a move from SAP to Azure, and I know that your tech stack is a lot more complicated than just everything running on SAP, but as you were talking about making that migration, what were some of the thoughts that you were weighing as you were first considering, the business case for making such a move, and why do that at that time?
Yeah, I'd say it was really focused on some of the technology debt we had initially, right? I think that every manufacturer that's been around, especially as long as some of our sites and capabilities have been within our business, there was layers of BI capabilities that was kind of stacked on top of itself. Some of it was a little bit difficult to find the direct value to the business folks, either out on the floor or the business leaders themselves making decisions on a daily basis. We had missing points of integrations and connections within certain data sets that we had. So it really was identified as a place that financially, we had to make improvements, but not even just financially as the direct improvements, but the outcome for us to grow and become more efficient with what we're doing on a daily basis is really the driving factor.
So it sounds like you examined your tech stack. You've referenced the legacy systems here. We've got some of those on the screen here, just from a data foundation piece and some of the BI and 20 different source systems and DW data warehouse data, 1,100 reports, 1,300 ETL jobs, and we see this quite a bit with our manufacturing partners. Where as you were making this move, what was obviously there was a role of a business case for let's decommission some of these things, but as you're doing so, you encounter that lift and shift possibility or a rationalization possibility, and how do you know how to create that balance to move with speed versus let's take some of the time that we need in order to do this right?
I think people were getting what they needed in several pockets, but it was very hard to connect across these pockets, right? So a lot of individualistic aspects of our environment down to the users who are consuming the information. There's obviously some discovery necessary to understand where things were providing value and things that were needed. Or where, in some cases we saw 100 versions of the same data in the same report, but it was sent off to varying different degrees of folks and teams across the organization. So that level of rationalization and consolidation takes work, right? I mean, you have to start to dive in and make sense of it. You have to go interview the folks within the business. You have to understand where these things are providing information that ultimately drives decisions downstream. There is a little bit of that value mapping that you want to have within this. So it's important to understand that. I think those are things that we were working through, and ultimately the multiple technologies from an IT perspective, technology, it was too hard to maintain and bring a lot of this information together. So it wasn't just the technology consolidation, it's really a skills consolidation for the people downstream that can use it, right? So that if we want our people out in the business to become more available and part of the solution, and honestly develop some of this on their own. So it helped them kind of focus their skills, and we're seeing that benefit now as a result, where we're getting a lot of people out in the field that are becoming, to a point, a citizen developer, if you will, and building their own information, their own reports, their own automations. The AI and automation capabilities and bots that we're ultimately targeting now our discussions only because we've taken the journey through the first few steps already.
Let's talk a little bit about that journey, because obviously we have the era of AI and getting to that point. But you did mention the word citizen developer, and we see that one of the steps on the pathway to and the kind of maturity toward AI is giving them self-service capabilities and develop that citizen developer mentality, or that self-service where the business feeds itself as an intermediary to AI and what you can drive from it.
I think that we had to teach a little bit along the way to start with, right? People aren't just going to jump in and know what they need to do initially when they haven't been part of some of these type of efforts or projects in the past, nor do they understand the technology that is supporting it, right? So for about a year, we've been focusing on building things like you're seeing here on the slides, right? Improving some of the existing, I guess, content and visuals and that transparency you're talking about, so that they can get more familiar with it, interact with it in a different way, but also start to dive into the data sources and the data information and where it's coming from. And now what we're seeing is people asking to do these type of efforts on their own. They want to have access directly to the data sources so that they can start to build the visuals, so that they can start to enhance and provide automations on top of it, which is, to me, a kind of a logical next step on how we start to build some of this, so that they can start to build it and maintain some of this stuff on their own where they see it, or maybe even just trial and error of what they're really trying to do to prove points and improve different KPIs or decision making out in the business.
Once you get these systems together and some of the data together, can you speak to how that can impact change that you may not have even seen coming?
Largely creating a Kanban concept with the data sources from multiple systems and merging them and slamming them together to basically get some sort of, I'll just call it simple visuals that people hadn't seen in that format before. Previously it may have taken 5 different people and pulling information together and, doing this stuff manually. So that was a foundation that allowed us to continue to build on top of it, that will ultimately build different visuals. Like, you see a lot of red in some of these reports. Well, that's perhaps on purpose, because some of those anomalies and things that are being caught now by looking at the data and making decisions on it on the back end are now apparent and aware to people, that they don't have to go create and spend the time to get to the point of creating those red items. And then, and as a result of that very simple workflow on the right side, what we're seeing is things that were largely done by a set of people and human efforts are now able to be automated, because we have pulled some of this data together, we have seen it, and we can make decisions on it. So we're already seeing some of this effect of building workflow, building automations, building some sort of intelligence around actions that we don't need to do anymore, because we have some information at our fingertips that we can ultimately make those decisions on and put the workflow together. So wouldn't have existed a year ago in the organization.
Obviously, you have some red on that, and you said then you identified some root cause analysis, and it may be a handful of root causes, but then we're able to put together a Power Automate solution to automate some of the frontline workers of the customer service team, to then start to get to be more proactive. But the value that you're driving across the business is admirable, and I can't wait to continue to see how it unfolds this year and in the coming year, to continue to leverage the investment that you've made. I know that Microsoft's put in some dollars. Can you speak to the ways that you might have been able to move more quickly as a result of having some of that funding to invest in that infrastructure to get you to where you can start to really light up some of the value propositions for the business?
Yeah, I mean, I think it comes down to looking holistically at what options you have to get to the final outcome that you're desiring, right? And I mean, there's things that you can do internal at your organization. There's programs that you can take advantage of. And in the end, it's about getting started and working through this. And I think that you'll also start to identify and find some of these, soft cost improvements like this one we just mentioned here, that'll ultimately benefit you down the stream. So, I mean, I think that, it's always good to start exploring and looking at how other people have done some of this. As you mentioned, there's a lot of assumptions around what AI means to industry, and especially within manufacturing or logistics for that matter. And I think that there's a lot of options we have as we look forward, but the simple things around generative and some of the, different capabilities that exist within this are great places to begin. And it's not going to solve world peace for your organization and business, but I think finding some of these small, simple, really good starting use cases where you can build on top of and get your people rallying behind it is important. And I think those are the type of use cases to bring to partners and bring to, folks like Microsoft and say, hey, how can we solve some of this?
You referenced the logistics and those sorts of things. You're considering doing some track and trace capabilities and predict when things will arrive for your logistic business for shipments, and give your customers and other stakeholders visibility into where and how and when and those sorts of things. Is that what you see as part of the evolution of having already brought this data together, that you can then begin to leverage that in some meaningful ways?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think that there's some capabilities, many capabilities we already have around some of this within our business, but we believe it can be improved, right? So there's a lot of different things that we're doing right now to look at some of the data that's being collected within our logistics organization and how we can start to enhance some of that, provide better value to our customers, different services to our customers, and ultimately start to drive those type of improvements.
You've referenced getting alignment on people and process and technology and some of the different challenges there. Any parting words of wisdom?
Obviously the topic of the day here is around basically ERP data and AI, and I think that that's a great target, right? I think that there's steps in the journey that we've obviously been focusing on here around the data and analytics efforts and the technology stack that we have to support this in order to get to that point. So are we fully there? Are we have 30 different projects going on and 30 different outcomes identified at this point? No. I think having that good foundation around your data and analytics and getting a handle on your data and being able to use it quickly is very important to get to that point in time. I think in order to do that, though, you got to have the right skills and the right support to do so. And then lastly, no different than any other IT project, you have to measure something. So whether you want to throw some KPIs together, measure outcomes, measure your employee engagement, customer engagement, whatever it is, I think that understanding that and measuring those are vital to understand where you're going, and that then you can pivot and make decisions quickly, because what you say day 1 versus day 90 versus month 6, month 12 and ongoing is going to be very different. So you got to be able to measure some things and make some quick decisions as you move forward.
Perfect. Well, thank you for taking the time, Mark, and I'm sure our audience benefited greatly from the experience that you've already been through.
Yep. Appreciate it, James.